To the beach one week and was at church camp and got to teach a lot at church camp, but had a great time at Maywood as always. But we're going to be in Galatians 5. You know, we've been talking about the fruit of the Spirit and we've been talking about the different characteristics. Brad kind of did a light touch on each one. My job tonight is to kind of get a little bit more in depth with one particular one, and each week we'll go in depth in each piece of that fruit. Like we said, I clarified, I think, at the beginning, it wasn't fruits, it was a fruit. So we think about the idea of these are all one pieces of it. I'm going to talk about the one that tonight that I feel like really is the catalyst for all the ones coming behind it. And that is, and I'll read it again just for our memory here, in Galatians 5, starting in verse 22, it says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law." And I will be teaching on love tonight. Okay. To me, I feel like that the reason it's in the front, obviously it's inspired, but the reason it's in front is it's the one that all the other ones I feel like flow out of. It's the one that is the one, maybe one of the ones, the hardest ones, because it's so encompassing. It takes up so much and it has so many different ways. And we're going to kind of talk about its characteristics, this idea of love and what that looks like, what, obviously brotherly love looks like, and then also what kind of this unconditional love that God's calling for us to have, which we all struggle with, or at least I do. And so we're going to kind of hit that. So we'll start off with this question for you, and how, in your own terminology, not the definition of Webster, don't pull it up, in your own terminology, how do you define the word love? But for you, if somebody says, what does love mean to you, or what is the definition of love? Obviously, the anniversary couple over there, Joe's pointing back and forth. That is the epitome of that. So if we were to give it a picture, there it is. Obviously, probably more sided on hers than yours, but still, yes, probably a lot more love coming from her because I have known you a long time. And I take it back. I've known Alexa a long time, too, since college, so college lifetime. So, yes, definitely. So besides them, what else? When you hear the word love and have to define it, if somebody asked you, what would you tell them?
Genuine care for others.
A genuine care for others. That's very good. All right.
First thing I thought of was sacrifice, or willing to give all that you have for the other. And that kind of reiterated, reaffirmed what I was thinking.
That's right. Alexa's been pouring it out. I know she's been doing a good job of it.
A choice, not just a feeling.
Okay, so it's a choice. I good, because a lot of times we hear about people falling out of love or in love and out of love like they're riding a roller coaster. And sometimes it feels that way, I'm sure. But yes.
Connected with that, it's an action. There's no such, you can't see it, right? It's an action, and so it's subjective in that nature. So it's a choice
right. It is a choice we make. It's something we have to constantly think about, constantly we're doing. And it comes out of us. And people who really love people, and you all have somebody in your mind, I know I do, several people that really genuinely just love everybody and just want the best of everybody, and don't matter, even if they're terrible people, they still want the best for that terrible person. Those are people out there. And they're rare, unfortunately. Some of us are known as loving people, but not to that. In other words, if you put it this way, if somebody was in another class somewhere and they asked the question, if you had one person you think is a very loving person, hopefully your name would pop in their heads. That's kind of what we're talking about here. Trying to get to that point. Not that we're not loving people, but so if you describe that person, think about that person. What, and these could be characteristics. Is there anything else that adds to them?
Patsy Sims always comes to mind.
Yeah, mine too. So I mean, yes, I agree.
If you live in this town, Patsy Sims is.
Yes. Now, how did Patsy get such a good reputation? That's what and I'll tell you this story in a second.
She was genuine about everything.
Yes.
Everything she said.
Yes. That would yours too. Same thing. Very genuine. Never seen her. I asked one time. I had the boys in my college group at Cottondale, and I was asking the guys, the grandsons, has Miss? I've seen my grandparents get mad, like the switch. I'm gonna pinch your ear off. Those statements. But that's from and I know it's hard for y'all to believe my grandparents would say that to me, but. I asked, I think it was Hunter, or maybe Christian. I asked Christian one time, I said, Christian, what is the worst thing you've ever heard your grandmother say? Because I really wanted some dirt on Patsy. Like, I felt like inside, you can't be that great. And he said, and Hunter said, well, one time, I think it was him or Christian, they said, one time I was going up, he said, I think I was fixing my third plate. He said, I done eat 2 plates, and I'm going for number 3. And he said, Patsy pats me on the hand and said, baby, I probably don't need to get you another one. I think you've had enough. And he said, that may be the worst thing I've ever heard. She pretty much told him to cut back that one time. So that was it. So that's great. Your grandmother said, so yes, Miss Patsy. So this the genuineness, I think. It's just, it oozes out of them. I've always, her and others that are like that, When you go to them, you felt better when you walked away, which I feel like is a very true testament of love. Yes, yes.
I think you said something important just then, which is what
I hope I said a lot important, but yes, I'm just kidding.
Is that Patsy made you feel it?
Right. Yeah, but great. You felt it. You did feel it, and that's good. That's how we should all aspire to be. Not necessarily just like her, but that whatever is in us, whatever God's given us, the opportunity to love others, to be that type of person, that type of Christian. And I'll say it a lot, and you'll hear me say it if you hear me teach any. I always call it reverse door knocking. That you live in such a Christian way, in such a good way, that people want to come to you and find out why you're so different than everybody else. You don't have to knock a lot of doors. If we all did a better job of living that way in our daily lives, my opinion is, people would come to us and want to know about that hope within us. Peter talks about that, I think, or Paul, one of those two. I think it's Peter. But anyway, so just kind of that idea, and you'll hear me say that. I'll reference that a lot. So that's our definition, and so we have different ones for it. And we're going to kind of jump around a couple passages real quick. So let's go to Romans chapter 12 real quick. The good thing is I forgot my glasses today, so I'm going to do my best. I wore them all day. Megan, I actually have glasses now. It's terrible. But anyway, I've reached it. I made it to 46, so I'm pumped. Before I had to get them. So, and we'll start in verse 9 of Romans 12. It says, let love be genuine. So there we just said that. It says, however what is evil, hold fast to what is good. In verse 10, love one another with brotherly affection, outdo one another in showing honor. So that is one way to describe love. A lot of people don't necessarily think that that's what they're talking about in the passage in Galatians, but that is, brotherly love is one of the attributes of having love. And so the part we're talking about tonight, I feel that this verse and the things that are coming behind it is really helping is the kind of love that is the best for someone else, even though that other person may not deserve it, and a sacrifice must be required, which is what you kind of said a second ago. And so it's sacrificing and loving people that are unlovable. You know, we're real good sometimes, and I think if we're not careful, everybody likes a good birthday gift and a Christmas gift. I know you do. I'm more excited about Halloween decorations, but that's okay. It's just me. I'm weird. But if you know me, that's what I'm into. But I feel like a lot of times that we give a gift, we give a good gift, we want a good response to go with it. Nothing wrong with that. And it wouldn't be bad if we got something good in the response back. Why not? You know, I'm going to spend this amount of thought into this, and you're just going to pick something off the Dollar Tree aisle and hand it to me. It's kind of like, the shock there. And I'm joking about that. But that's a lot of times how we do a lot of the good deeds that we do. It's an automatic built in that we want some kind of good response out of them, or we'd like it kind of reverberated down the road. Okay? I used to try to take my college students out for lunch, because that was one thing when I was a college minister. That's one thing they all needed was lunch, because they were all poor. And I actually have a book of all the ones that still owe me. I'm just kidding. That'd be great. I told Jordan, I said, I'll tell you, if I ever called them all at the same time, I could eat free for 2 months. And it would be great. Brooke still owes me a breakfast. So we're going to work on that. And Brooks, don't think I don't have it up here. Yeah, he reminded me a minute ago. I'm like, Brooks, I know. Don't worry about it. I know you owe me breakfast. So anyway, I'm joking. But it's doing things that people that don't deserve. Of course, my college students. But then it's also, I think it goes a little bit further than that. And I think it's about testing ourselves. We're not real good at testing ourselves. And when I say testing ourselves, what do you think I mean by that? And I'll explain, obviously. When it comes to loving others, how do we test ourselves? How do we push ourselves to love better and harder?
Teenagers.
That would be an excellent thing. Yes, having teenagers. Joe said teenagers.
Loving them when they're unlovable.
Yes.
Even as, loving your spouse when they're even unlovable. I'm talking unlovable.
Mostly you, yes, I understand.
But, there's times that
Yes.
you have to dig real deep.
Okay, anybody else? Teenagers for sure.
To go along with that, it's easy for everybody to love Patsy Sims.
Yes.
But there are those people who are almost above being loved.
Yes.
And it's a test to try to treat them the same way sometimes.
Yes. Now, and I guess we'll get to this in a minute, but this is a thought to kind of think about as we go through this is, how do I get to that point? I'm here, wherever you are, on this line of being able to freely give my love to enemies, neighbors, people I can't stand, to do sacrifice on their behalf. Wherever you are right now on that line of progression, how do I get to there? And that's one of the things I want you to kind of think about as we do that. and think about your own life. Okay, I do pretty good in this, I do pretty good in this, I do terrible in that.
There's trial and error and self-control.
It's a lot of trial and error. Okay, definitely. It's a lot of self-control. I think that's the end of all of Ephesians 5 there. But yes,
Verse 14 says us for us to bless them and not curse them.
yes.
I mean, that's what this whole, the rest of the verses there is our to-do list to love. If you break it down and do 1, 2, 3, and when you get down, it says, bless those that persecute you, which would be
Yeah.
those that are unlovable,
Yes, ma'am.
that are hard to love, and bless and do not curse.
Yeah, rejoice with rejoice, weep with those who weep, and live with harmony with one another.
Well, and show them respect. I mean, you know, like today I had 2 prisoners, and a lot of people, they're ugly to a lot of people. They weren't to me, because I treat them with respect. I treat them like they're an individual, and they're so respectful to me. 99% of the time, they'll say, yes ma'am, yes ma'am. And you know, it's kind of like, you wonder.
Yeah, and honestly, there's a lot of people out there that just gonna love who they're gonna love, and they're not gonna worry about everybody else. And there's those people. But you're exactly right. That's what sets us apart, is being different from other people and taking those opportunities like you took, and being kind and being respectful. And that's gonna make you stand out before you hardly even have to say much. Just the way you treat them.
And that's verse 16. Do not be proud, but willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited.
Yeah, repay no one evil for evil. Yes, ma'am. Verse 17. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's how, if we come at people being conceited, we are not gonna get, 1, we're not showing love. But 2, we're not gonna get an easy response back.
No, you're exactly right. All right, so let's go. Excellent point. Let's go to Romans 5 real quick. Just a couple pages back.
And practice, it's not gonna come easily.
Yes, we're gonna get to that in a minute. But yes,
Keep practicing
definitely,
it.
definitely practice.
That's gonna be with all the fruits.
Yes. All right, so we'll start in verse 6. I'm really going to hit on verse 8 of Romans chapter 5. It says, for a while we were still weak, or I wrote a little note that says helpless. But while we were weak or helpless, at the right time Christ died for the ungodly. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would dare even to die. But verse 8 says, but God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Since then, therefore, we have been justified by blood, much more shall we be saved. And then talks about how we were enemies and we were reconciled, verse 10. So the source of our love has to be what? That's, what?
He died for us.
Yes. Yes. If you're going to run out of energy, you're going to run out of love, you're going to run out of this, you have to revert back to the original source. I talked about this, I'll talk about this later on, but talking about the passage where Christ says he's the true vine, and whoever's attached to him pretty much will continue to grow, they prune, all that good stuff. That's my paraphrase. But that's the thing, once we separate ourselves from the vine, once we let go of the vine and we try to start growing our own tree here, you're going to run out. You're going to dry up. You're not going to get the nutrients you need, and you're going to get burned out, and you're just going to be a very hateful person. You'll eventually get there. And so what we have to remember is as we're practicing, as you said, as we're practicing loving the unlovable, that's easy. Like I said, it's easy to love people that love us back. That's easy. And as teenagers, kind of are in that midpoint, they still love you occasionally, sometimes. When you buy them a new car, that stuff. Huh?
When you say yes.
Yeah, when you say yes to them, of course. But you never say yes. But also, as we remember that on the days that we're struggling the most, my recommendation is on the days that we struggle the most, this is a passage that we need to revert back to, and we need to think about this idea that we are very unlovable, but yet God sacrificed so much. As imperfect as we are, and terrible people as we are, and the way we look, and the way we just blaspheme Him all the time, and the way we live, and all the other things. He knew that going into it, and still sacrificed Christ allowed that to happen on our behalf. And so on those days where you're hitting the lowest, on the days where you don't want to tolerate anybody, okay, especially if you're in customer service, or teach high school, yes. On the days that you're feeling very unlovable, it is a good reminder to remember. Good reminder to remember. That sounds good. Good reminder to remember that you are very unlovable. and God still loves you, and He still takes care of you, and He still listens to your prayers, and He answers them yes or no sometimes. And all those things are there, and of course He sent Christ for you on your behalf so that you can go to heaven one day. All that happened at your worst moment. Whatever your worst moment is that you've had up to this point or will have up to this point, God still loves you. And so I feel like that's a good reminder, and I forget it sometimes, but it is a very good reminder to kind of keep pushing me forward, to remind me why I'm in this, to remind me why I got to practice more and I've got to do these other things. It's because that's support. Yes, Mr. Ray.
So this may be too obvious to state, but
It's okay.
This is what separates us from the natural world. You're talking about this is the fruit of the Spirit. We've been grafted into the vine.
Yes.
The fruit that we show is not natural. So when Jan talks about loving somebody in a situation where they're hard to love, whatever, that's because of what you just said. It's because we're engrafted into the vine. Now, this comes from Jesus. This comes from God. It's not natural. We don't stand out from the natural world unless we're doing these non-natural things. And a part of this idea of the fruit is it's an outward sign, a demonstration of who we are.
Yes.
And loving your kids, everybody loves the kids, but loving that tough to love person or being gentle in a time like that or having self-control, these fruit, that's unnatural, and that's what shows God to people.
Yeah, I taught on fruit of the Spirit at camp. So they were my practice run. I taught every day on certain things. I didn't get a lot covered because some of these things went over to the next day, and that was fine. But one of the things that I thought for me is a good wake-up call for me. When I start to where I don't feel like I can love strangers and pray for my enemies and stuff like that, it's a good reminder to me that I may have let go of the vine. That, to me, that's the wake-up call. Sometimes I don't think I realize that I have let go and I'm just doing my own thing and whatever, or I'm not embedding myself back into the Word or allowing it to read in the Spirit to talk to me through the passages and to work in my life. I feel like I've kind of let go of that, and now I find myself just living. And I feel like that is a great reminder that, hey, I'm not meditating enough, I'm not praying enough, I'm not studying enough, I'm not being around enough Christians enough, I got to get back a hold of the vine again. And I think that's a good reminder. And as any of these things, as you struggle with what's coming down the road here in Ephesians 5 that we're going to talk about with perseverance and with long-suffering and with self-control and those other things, I feel like that is really the crux of it all. The final point is that we've let go, or we're in the process of barely touching it, or whatever that is. And that's a good recall. Hey, I got to get back. I need to get back here. And it's a good, we're always talking about self-reflection. I think that's important to self-reflect a lot. And where do I need to go? How do I need to improve my life? So, and obviously, Ephesians chapter 5, verse 2, we'll read it real quick. It says, verse 1 says, "Therefore be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God." Kind of the same thing. We talked about God, and then this is Christ. Obviously, there's other verses that go with this. So two good reminders. What God did for us and what Christ did for us is a good reminder of the type of love that should flow out of us. And then, of course, if we went to the Good Samaritan, I just have this as a note, a Good Samaritan in Luke chapter 10, just, the story, but just the fact of what he did for this complete stranger. And didn't have to, went that extra mile, paid whatever, I'll come back and sell it when I'm done. Got off his donkey, put him on it, he walked, all the things that go with that, and the hatred between those two cultures. Just that whole story in general is an epitome, or what we should be striving for, is trying to find the unlovable and really being able to put that together. The great thing about studying this is that I have realized how much work I have to do. And is really, I thought I was doing okay. I thought I was doing all right. I think we all at times think like we're doing okay. And then as I studied this and as I really broke down each word and go through this, I got a lot more work on long suffering. Man, my self-control is terrible. And all these other things that I'm thinking about. And so I challenge you to do that too. Pick out these words and these characteristics as we continue through this. Y'all are welcome to my notes. And really dig into that and really focus on those particulars. And I really feel like that will help you. It has helped me a good bit, and obviously teaching it helps me as well. So let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. We're going to kind of continue on this unconditional love. I've actually used this several times. I've used it a lot in weddings that I've done. And we know this is the way of love chapter, or that's what mine says, but it has different things. Most people usually hit on verse 4. And so I'm going to read it real quick, and I want you to think about the idea of love, and I want you to think about if there are positives and negatives to what I'm saying, okay? Just kind of think about that as I read this. We'll start at verse 4. It says, love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. I can barely usually make it past verse 5, and I'm already done. It's over with. Okay. Verse 5 is not irritable or resentful. Verse 6, it does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Love never ends, as prophecies will pass, and tongues that will cease, as for knowledge will pass away. For we know in part, we prophesy in part. And verse 11 talks about when I was a child. Verse 12, let's go down there. He says, for we see, for we see in a mirror dimly, but face now I know in part. Then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. Verse 13, so now faith, hope, and love abide. These are three, but the greatest of these is love. You've heard this plenty of times. So I really want you to focus on 4 through 8 for me for a second. What are the positives and negatives that you hear in that? What comes to mind? Maybe all negatives, I don't know. Whatever you hear. Some attributes, some positive and negative attributes.
It never
love.
ends.
All right, never ends. Is that a positive or a negative?
Oh, that's positive.
Positive.
Love.
Okay. All right. Somebody else. Very good.
Well, keeping no record of wrongs, if that's towards you, it's a very positive
excellent.
thing. But if you're expected to not, when you are expected to not keep any record of wrongs, sometimes that it can have a negative effect on you.
Yes. Anybody else? Both excellent points. I think one thing that helps me decide whether I'm a loving person or not, or being a loving person, is to take my name, and I've said this before, take my name and put my name in the place of the word love. And if I can read that if I can make it past verse 4, but as you read that, that is a good wake-up call to remind me that I've got a long way to go, or these are areas I need to improve on. So it's easier for you to read my name, but that's okay. Randy's patient and kind. Randy does not envy or boast. Randy's not arrogant or rude. He doesn't insist on his own way. See, I'm over there. That's it. Yeah, I'm gone. And that own way got me. Randy's not irritable or resentful. Yeah, gone. Everybody's popping the chutes, jumping out of the planes. Come out here, Randy. Randy does not rejoice. And y'all laughing at me, and I'm reading this by myself. I'm just playing. Randy does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with truth. Randy bears all things, believes all things, and hopes all things. I mean, that's pretty strong. And to me, that's a good gauge of what we got to work on, and a good gauge to. If you're having those days where you feel like you're struggling, just read that and put your name in it, and it's a good. Hey, you know what? I got to grab the vine again. I'm kind of letting go again. It really has been. I feel like a lot of times on the days that I feel the most irritable or feel really super agitated, I just try to remember that verse and kind of go back to it, flip through it in my phone app. And, yeah, I'm not doing good on the being kind right now. And that's what we're trying to get to. That's the type of love that we're discussing here in Galatians, is this love that is all these things, this patient, all encompassing. I said, excuse me.
I know we're talking about how we have to kind of reflect and recognize it, but sometimes don't you wonder what some people, like the unlovable people we've talked about, what they even think about love? Like if they even have a concept of it in the way that we're talking about it, in the way that some people do act. You know, you kind of wonder when you're reading this. It's kind of easy, I think, for us to think about love.
Yes.
But when you run into some of certain people that have those kind of attitudes we're talking about, you kind of wonder, I don't know if they have a concept of really what love is. And what I kind of struggle with is trying to help people understand what it is. Sometimes, because really, I think some people don't know love. They've had so much happen in their life.
Yes.
That they don't know what it is.
Yes.
And, you know, working with young people and stuff, you see so many different situations that, you know, taking time out to kind of teach people about love, I think is just as important as anything.
Yes.
I mean, because we have a lot of people out there that do not have a concept of what we're talking about.
Yes. I'll say this: one of my favorite things to do. All my vehicles are paid off right now, so I don't need another one. But one of my favorite things I used to do, hadn't done it in a while, is I like to go to car lots and drive cars. If I get busy, like some women go shopping, I just go drive cars that I'm not gonna buy. And, but the fact I look like I could buy it usually gets them to come out. You know, pre-COVID, I mean, I could drive anything. You'd be amazed what I could drive. All I do is ask. I've actually got to ride in a Ferrari. Never got to drive it, but I tried. I really did. When he told me it was $400,000, like, you're fine driving. You just drive. I'm good. But anyway, beside the point. So one of my favorite things to do when I'm riding with a car salesman in the back, number one, try to scare him. Number two, is I ask him what kind of car he drives. Now, if you're working at a Honda lot, and Honda is the best thing since sliced bread, and you're driving a Volkswagen, that doesn't make sense to me. Could have been a gift, probably not. But yes, I didn't. They never say that part. Oh, my mama gave it to me. I'm in. Yeah. My mom gave me a Corolla, and I had to sell it. I was like, you can't pick women up in this car. Yeah, a lot of bad memories in there. Getting your tail whooped. You just don't. You want to kind of get rid of that car. I kind of went with it. I'm just kidding. My dad will watch this. He'll get a good laugh out of that one. But now, the reason why I bring that up is a lot of that is telling them about the product, love. And then a lot of it is being it, not that you're not doing a good job with that. I really think it's a two-way street there on that. It's number one is talking about what love is. So in other words, tell me Honda's the best thing, and it's one of all these car and driver things. And then number two is come here and let me show you my Honda in the parking lot that I drive. And what I mean by that is it's living that type of lifestyle. It's really being completely different than anybody they've ever met before in a good way.
Well, and I think our some of us didn't grow up in an environment where you gave a testimony.
Yes, ma'am.
But to your analogy, I have a Honda, and I've had it for 25 years.
Oh, yeah.
Let me show it to you.
Yeah.
And it looks like it's 5 years old. In other words, if you take that analogy on, then you can sell the fact that Honda
It's a pretty good
is
car.
the car that you need
I
to
need
have.
to head in that direction.
But it's not just the checklist of, miles,
Yes.
warranty, all that kind of stuff. It's the real life stuff that made you want that. This passage is good to read in the Message version
Yes, ma'am.
because it's real.
I see you reading
I'm
that.
just saying.
I got ESV up here.
Yeah, it's read that sometime this
Yes,
week
ma'am.
because it's life doesn't force itself on others. It doesn't always ask for me first. In other words, it uses
Yes, ma'am.
it uses some words that
More common language.
more common language that I think, to Chandra's point, that young people would understand.
Yes.
It's not me first.
Yeah, which it's tough, Chandra, in your position or in any of our positions, because our world is really revolving around us and self and what I get and the gratification that I get instantly and all that good stuff. So I think that is something. It is trying to show them. I was with her till I got to go out and see it in the parking lot first. Yes,
So I saw a sermon once by a guy who was a former atheist, and he's a scientist, and he was talking about his conversion. It wasn't people who approached him with regard to apologetics and evolution or creation or whatever. It was he went to church with his wife, and he witnessed the love of the church. Like, so this is the love for one another. This is the love, the brotherly love within the church, and he saw the things that they did for one another, how they treated each other, and that's what converted to Christianity. And that's the part of this kind of unnatural world we live in, this spiritual world we live in, that you can't tell somebody about. Is what you're talking about. That it has to be demonstrated, and for it to be demonstrated, sometimes well, I know in that case it had to get around the fellowship of the church, right?
Yes.
It's kind of hard to demonstrate this kind of love at your job or whatever. I mean, you can be a nice and loving person, but until they actually see what it means, to be in a family like that.
Yes. So I was going to try to close with something. I forgot what it was, but anyway. So really, what we're talking about here is what is love, and what kind of love we're looking for. Next week, we'll try to go into how important it is to love, and our passage that we'll be hitting on there. We'll start with will be John 13, 34, and 35. So if you'd like to have something to find a focus on this week, John 13, 34 through 35. He was going to pretty much talk about the evidence of being a true disciple, what that looks like. It should be pretty evident in all your works, not necessarily just within church, but definitely outside world, how you treat others, how you treat that strangers. And a lot of that's going to be our ego and our pride is going to have a problem with it. People taking advantage of us, that's going to be another thing that always rolls in their head. And what are they going to do with that money I just give them? All those things that pop in their head. And what we're trying to achieve, and I feel like we can do it, what we're trying to achieve is it doesn't really matter anymore. That it don't matter if people take advantage of me. It don't matter if people slap me on the left and we'll turn for the right. That's what we're trying to head towards. And the sooner we get there, I mean, it's great to get there at 80, but it'd be great to get there in our 40s. The sooner we get there, the better everything around us will get. And things that we used to worry about, we won't worry about no more. And I really feel like that's probably one of the best areas that we can grow as a congregation is the love that we have genuinely for other people. Programs are great, and ministers are great, and all the stuff's good, but it's just the genuine love we have for other people, and especially the unlovable people, because those are the ones we're trying to convert, the prisoners, those people, the people that nobody else has had a rough go since day one, and they're 30 years old and they ain't had nothing good positive yet. That's why you'll stand out. And honestly, side note, and then we're closing. Side note, they're going to try to figure out what your angle is first, and then it takes time. So, but we'll get to that another night. So, anyway, thank you for your time. Hope you have a great rest of the week. See you, Pops.